Welcome to Gemara Academy. In this class, we will learn Taisis Dibra Maschel, Ilema Da'ada Sora Huda Avakarmelis, V'iloi Loi Havakarmelis. Let's begin by looking at the flowchart of the Gemara so we could see what Taisis is coming to explain. So here in the Gemara, we asked on what Rav Sheshes said about a Karmelis, V'teifeses Adasara. And the Gemara asks, My V'teifeses Adasara. What does V'teifeses Adasara mean? And the Gemara continues with its question by negating a possible interpretation. It says, Ilema, if you're going to tell me, and we're going to present over here the girsa that's found in our Gemara, that only when it has walls that are 10 tefachim high, who da have a karmelis, then it's a karmelis. And if it doesn't have walls that are 10 tefachim high, loy have a karmelis. If you're going to tell me that's what he meant, we can't say that because that won't fit with the teaching from Rav Gidol. So this is the part of the Gemara that Tosfos is coming to talk about and explain. So let's see the general outline of Tosfos. The Gemara explained that we can't say that v'teifeses adasara means that adasara hu da hava karmelis, v'iloi loy hava karmelis. So we underline those words because that's the focus of Tosfos. And there's two parts of Tosfos. Number one, Tosfos will present how Rashi explains these words and ask two questions on him. And number two, Tosfos will present his understanding of these words. So let's see the Tosfos now in the flowchart form. The Gemara explained that we can't say that v'teifeses adasara means that adasara hu da hava karmelis, v'iloi loy hava karmelis. So Tosfos begins by presenting how Rashi understands these words, and it's in a purple arrow pointing upwards because it's explaining the words of the Gemara. He says Rashi explains an example of this is a bika that's surrounded by a wall, is larger than two beisa, and isn't enclosed around the house. So what this is referring to, because if it's enclosed around the house, then it will be a Rosh Hashanah. We're referring to an area, a bika, that's larger than two beisa. It's surrounded by a wall, but it was not hukaf ladira. It wasn't surrounded for the purpose of residential use. And we know that in such a case, a person can carry more than 4 amos in that area. So the way we're going to understand this part of the Gemara is that if the walls of the bika are 10 tefachim high, then it's categorized, then it's classified as a karmelis, and a person can carry in it more than 4 amos. However, if the walls surrounding it are not 10 tefachim high, then it's not classified as a karmelis, and a person is allowed to carry in it even more than 4 amos. So this is how Rashi understands this part of the Gemara. So Tosfos presents two difficulties that the Ri has with this explanation. This is difficult to the Ri for two reasons. Number one, this is a Rosh Hashanah according to Ula and Rav Ashi, and we don't have to bring in Rav Gidol. If this is what the Gemara meant, we wouldn't bring in Rav Gidol to ask a question on it. We would simply bring up Ula and Rav Ashi from the previous Gemara, like we learned that if it was surrounded for residential use, then it's a Rosh Hashanah and it's treated as a Rosh Hashanah. If it's not surrounded for residential use, then although it's a Rosh Hashanah, we don't treat it like a Rosh Hashanah simply because it's such a large area. It's similar and it seems like a Rosh Hashanah, therefore it's also to carry more than Dalet Amos in it. But fundamentally, everybody agrees it's a Rosh Hashanah. So if this is what the Gemara meant, then the Gemara wouldn't negate this explanation from Rav Gidol, we would negate it from Ula and Rav Ashi. And we would say, how can you say that when the walls are 10 tefachim high, then it's a karmelis, but both Ula and Rav Ashi, in other words, everybody agrees that this area is not a karmelis at all, rather it's a Rosh Hashanah. So this is one difficulty that Tosfos has on Rashi, that we wouldn't bring Rav Gidol to negate this explanation, rather we would bring Ula and Rav Ashi to negate this explanation. And the second difficulty he has is, how can he say V'i loy loy have a karmelis, but the ocean and a bika don't have walls? How can we say that only if the walls are 10 tefachim high, then it's a karmelis, and if there aren't walls that are 10 tefachim high, then it won't be a karmelis? But we know the Brisa told us clearly that a yam and a bika, an ocean and an area of fields are a karmelis, and they don't have walls that are 10 tefachim high. So we would never even present this as a possible explanation for Rav Sheshes. That what Rav Sheshes was saying is that in order to qualify as a karmelis, there must be walls that are 10 tefachim high, and otherwise it won't be considered a karmelis. Rav Sheshes would never have meant such a thing. We'd never present it as possibly what he referred to, because we have a clear brisa that tells us that an ocean and an area of fields is a karmelis, and they don't have walls that are 10 tefachim high. So here we have two difficulties that Ri has with Rashi, and as a result, he presents his understanding of these words. And we'll point out once again, the Gerson our Gemara is Ilemad that it needs walls that are 10 tefachim high. And he says, re-explains that this is what it means. Means that it has the place for walls that are 10 tefachim high. And that's what we were negating. That maybe when Rav Sheshes said, V'teifeses adasara, maybe it meant, the Gemara is saying, what does it mean? And if you're going to tell me he meant that it has to have place for walls that are 10 tefachim high, then it will be a karmelis. But if there's no place to build walls that are 10 tefachim high, it won't be a karmelis. We can't say this, we brought down Rav Gidol, like we'll see in a moment. That's what we were thinking of, maybe what Rav Sheshes meant. That needs place for walls that are 10 tefachim high, and for that has nothing to do with Ula and Rav Ashi. And number two, an ocean, an area of fields have place for walls that are 10 tefachim high. So both of the questions, both of the difficulties of the Ri on Rashi don't apply over here. So what would be the two examples of something that has place for walls that are 10 tefachim high and something that doesn't have place for walls that are 10 tefachim high? So he explains, which excludes a bika that has a roof that's lower than 10 tefachim. So he gives an example. If there's a bika misug cheches, there's a bika that has a roof on it, supported by kundusim, by posts. So such an area, if such an example, if the ceiling is lower than 10 tefachim, then that won't qualify as a karmelis because there's no place to build walls that are 10 tefachim high. So which excludes, says Tosfos, a bika that has a roof that's lower than 10 tefachim, that will be a mokum ptur, and one can carry in the whole thing. So what we were thinking, what we're negating for Rav Sheshes to mean is that it needs to have place for walls that are 10 tefachim high. And if it didn't have place for walls that are 10 tefachim high, then it won't qualify as a karmelis. Rather, it'll be a mokum ptur. It'll be permitted to carry in the whole thing. And to this we brought Rav Gidl. And the question on this is from Rav Gidl. That we see Rav Gidl says that even when the ceiling is lower than 10 tefachim, it's asur to carry more than daled amas. So the way Ri understands it is, we're said as follows. My v'tefeses adasara. What does it mean, v'tefeses adasara? If you're going to tell me it means that it has to have place to build walls that are 10 tefachim high, and then it'll be a karmelis. But if there's no place to build walls that are 10 tefachim high, then it won't be a karmelis, rather it'll be a mokum ptur. And it'll be permitted to carry in the whole thing. Va'amar of Gidl, but Rav Gidl told us that when the ceiling is lower than 10 tefachim, and there's no place to build walls that are 10 tefachim high, it's not permitted to carry in the whole thing, but rather it's asur to carry more than daled amas. So here we have the whole Tosfos. So to summarize, we have the explanation of Rashi that it has to have walls that are 10 tefachim high to be a karmelis. But if there are no walls that are 10 tefachim high, it won't be a karmelis. We have two difficulties with this. Number one, we would challenge this from Ula and Rav Ashi, not from Rav Gidl. And number two, we would never think to say that a karmelis has a requirement to have walls that are 10 tefachim high, because we know clearly that a yam is a karmelis and a bik is a karmelis, and they don't have walls that are 10 tefachim high. And then we presented the explanation of Ri that what we're negating is as follows, that if it has place to build walls that are 10 tefachim high, then it's a karmelis. If it doesn't have place to build walls that are 10 tefachim high, then it's a mokum ptur, and one can carry in the whole thing. And we challenge this from Rav Gidl that says that even when there's no place to build walls that are 10 tefachim high, it's not a mokum ptur, and it's not mutter to carry in the whole thing. Rather, it's also to carry in such an area more than daled amas.